recording on this computer.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we are recording now. For those of you who are joining the recording, we are welcoming the Reverend Phyllis Byrd from Global Ministries. She has been serving as a Global Ministries mission co-worker in Kenya. 35 years, you were just sharing. 35 years. She just shared a little bit about her work with Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and she's going to share more about things, all of that in her presentation. And I'm going to move to the slides right now. So in just a moment, I'm going to screen share. Oops, actually I have to do it from this angle, I think. Just one moment here. I apologize, a little technical challenges. Okay, share screen, share it. And there. Can you all see the initial slide? Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Quite often when I write about my work, someone wrote to church and said, why is she talking about so many other countries in Africa? When I worked with Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and even now, I work all over Africa. I say I sleep in Kenya, but work all over Africa. So I'm constantly on the move. So when I write and tell stories, I try to capture my whole work all over Africa and what I do in different places. I work, as I told you, in Global Ministries, which is the coming together of the UCC and the Disciples of Christ. Global Ministries work with partners around the world to strive for a world in which all people in creation share in God's abundant life. The core values in this mission are presence, neutrality, community, justice, and peace. I'd like us to look at Africa and the various other parts of the world that fit into the continent. I was just telling Steve earlier, I was talking to a young lady, and she was saying to me at the car rental place that she has a podcast. In her podcast, she's going to talk about the country of Africa. And I corrected her and said, it's a continent made up of many different countries. You can see it's 54 countries in the continent of Africa. And that's including, the North Sudan and South Sudan that just recently came in. And you can see how big it is, when I get questions sometimes, oh, I have a friend who is from Nigeria, and, do you know him? And I'm all in East Africa. Kenya's located in East Africa. No, I don't know your friend. I mean, but it's possible. There's sometimes that can happen. But you can see how large it is. It's the driest, it's the second, it's the second driest continent, I'm sorry, in continent after Australia. And there's different languages. I won't go through all the languages, but again, when we think about Africa, we want to know the languages spoken. Many countries have, it's Arabic, it's Swahili, especially in the eastern part. It's French, it's Francophone, it's Lusophone, which is Portuguese, it's Berber, it's Spanish in a few countries as well. So it's many different countries, but besides those languages I've mentioned, in let's say Kenya alone, the amount of ethnic groups you'll have people speaking their mother tongue. So in all these countries that's in the continent, you'll have maybe the language that they do business with, whether it be English, French, Portuguese, etc., or Arab, but yet they'll also have many different languages spoken by many different people. The Sahara is the largest desert of the world, and the biggest. It's bigger than the USA, the Sahara, which is in Africa. Again, how does Kenya look? I mean, that's a question that normally people want to know. And as you can see, it's the Nairobi at night. You can see it looks like any other city, but you'll also have the snow-capped mountains of Mount Kenya. But you'll also have the beach that's on the coast, which is in Mombasa. Kenya is surrounded by Ethiopia, Uganda, Somalia, and Tanzania. Also, the Indian Ocean is also the ocean that's on the side. Sudan is also one of the surrounding countries within Kenya. So again, you can see the size of it. You can see the 51 million people approximately live there. There are 42 different ethnic groups. I've told you the bordering countries in the Indian Ocean. We have amazing game. I remember when one of my daughters was going to school, one of the older daughters, before they started doing a lot of building, we would drive, I would take her to school, high school, and, on the side of the road, there would be giraffes, the side of the road. We still have, in certain areas, you'll have baboons on the side of the road, and it's amazing to see. Nairobi is a capital city, and it's a Maasai word that means cool waters. The average income is $1.90 per day. Imagine if you tried to live on $1.90, you would never be able to buy Starbucks on $1.90 a day. Kenya is located in the equator. As a matter of fact, when I called back, my husband's, he's in Kenya. He didn't come with us on this trip, and it's winter. The weather is reversed. The seasons are reversed, meaning in our summer here in the United States, it's winter in Kenya. And when it's winter here, it's summer in December through March. We also have rainy seasons that we have long rains and short rains in Kenya. And I think I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Let's go to the next slide.
I'm struck by average income, $1.90 per day.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
I work with the Organization of African Instituted Churches now, that's a very interesting organization that works with African instituted or African independent churches. These are churches that when the missionaries came to Africa, when the colonialists came, missionaries came also, and the churches went to evangelize. But there were some Africans who felt that they wanted them to be, depending on where they're from, a mirror image of them. They wanted them to be Anglicans. They wanted them, Scottish, wanted them to be Scottish. They brought their culture basically with them. And there was a group of Africans, many Africans throughout the continent, who felt that they wanted to be authentically who they were and not be made to fit into a Western model. And therefore, you'd have the African independent churches. You know that the Egyptian Coptic Church is one of the oldest churches that was established by Mark in the Gospels, and it was that we read about Mark, and it was 43 AD. The churches are classified in many different ways. The Roho means spirit in Swahili. You have the nationalist churches who fought for independence. You'll have the African Pentecostal, and you'll have the Egyptian Coptic Church. What are the categories? Quite often you'll see them wearing their robes. And what I love about the African independent churches, many of them don't have a traditional building like we're in now. Some of them will worship under trees, not worship trees, worship under trees for the space. But they start in a particular area, and then they will kind of beat their drums and go throughout the community. So again, what I love about that is because in our churches, if I stood up in one of our congregations and did the call of worship, I'm calling the worship those people within those four walls. But yet what they do is like, I'm calling the whole community, let us worship. People will join them. So the running joke is, when I feel that Christmas has come and I've overindulged, I said, I've got to get out there with the African independent churches so I can run and jog as they go from place to place and move, do some more movement. So, they wear distinctive uniforms or clerical garbs. I shouldn't say uniforms, clerical garb, and you'll know and recognize the different groups by the different garbs, the clothes that they're wearing. The next slide, please. The OAIC, Organization of African Instituted Churches, we have 4 areas of our work that's clustered together. We have the area of theology, which deals with theological formation with the many different churches. We have African independent churches. We have the livelihoods that deals a lot with farmers and looking at issues that affects the life of the people day to day. Community health person, especially we have a lot of issues that deal with health related in the villages. Africa, once you get out of the major cities in most African countries, the health is a challenge because you don't have health clinics nearby. People have to go for miles and miles to be able to get to a health clinic. And sometimes the densely populated areas in the city, again, there's a lot of health challenges. Just Communities. I'm the director of the Just Communities program, where I deal with areas like such as climate change, justice as it relates to the Sustainable Development Goals, poverty alleviation, social accountability, and many other things that fall under the rubric of justice. The arrows go around because it's an indication that, I find sometimes in our churches, especially in the West, we're very territorial, meaning, if you hired me to be the Christian education director, don't step on my toes. No one interferes with me, but I think everything kind of flows into the other. I cannot talk about just communities and justice issues without talking to theology. I cannot talk to, about what I do in the Just Communities program without working with livelihoods or even community health. So we kind of flow all together, and we are having conversations about all of our work because that's just how we roll, and it makes more sense. The next one, please. This is very difficult for me to read, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's okay. But because I don't want to necessarily read the data. That one of the things I want to point out to you, though, is that when we talk about Just Communities issues, and if you see the infant mortality rates in I think we have the issue of stunting as well, and in other areas in countries like Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, and if you compare them with Cuba, Finland, and Sri Lanka, you see that it's far below. I mean, it's above. And again, when the Bible says, I've come that you might have life and you have it more abundantly, what does that mean? Does it mean abundant life for a few people? I don't think so. I think that it's abundant life for all, so we need to begin to tackle this. And unfortunately, we're not equipping enough. And I think I'm going to mention this later. And if I do, we'll just pass it on. Most of our ministers who go through Western education, whether it be in the West or whether it be in Africa, will go to universities that's been started by the quote mother church. So you'll have the Presbyterian University, the Anglican College or University, or others. They don't begin to talk about practical theology. So our ministers are not really prepared when you go into an area that you're ministering to begin to raise some hard questions. If someone comes to me and says, my baby has died, Pastor, can you bury the baby or do the funeral, and then someone else the next week. The question for me I would raise is, why are so many babies dying? Not just, God gave, God take away, and do this, go through the service, but why are so many children dying? Why are so many mothers are having children who are under birth rate? Why are so many children being stunted in our community? These are some of the practical questions that I think we in Africa are saying, how do we now get our churches, our pastors who are going through ministerial formation to begin to do an analysis of their community that is constantly. So if you put me in somewhere where David is ministering, since you're now the pastor, I would have to definitely look at the community. I'd have to look at, the amount of schools, so many areas and questions I'd raise, the health conditions and so many things before I'm able to do ministry, because I am ministering more than just that congregation of how many members, but there are other questions that we must raise that I believe that we're called to do that. And that's what we're working on in Africa, so that we can get rid of this disparity between those that are born in Africa and the many issues that you see that they're struggling with, and those in other countries. Next passage, please. Global challenges, the next one, please. Global goals, the Sustainable Development Goals was something that came up by the United Nations. They said by 2030 that we would have no more hunger, the 17 development goals, poverty alleviation, issues of climate change, and the 17 that are there that I won't go on, equality in education, whatever. 2030 is about 7-8 years away. And as you can see, we will not end all of this. But I believe, and I say this to churches that I go speak to, whether it be in the United States or here, I think these are goals that we must work towards. How do we, work towards ending them? And I know it's big, but in preaching on today, I talked about the passage that comes from Hebrews 11. Faith is a substance of things hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen. And with that evidence of things not seen, we're not, we think about the small things, but yet not the big things. But faith is also an action point, We're not called to say, I'm going to pray and not have action. We're called to have action. How do we, as people of God, see the sustainable development goals as our, goals that God has called us, our divine calling, to begin to end these things? And if that's the case, then we begin to roll up our sleeves and say, how do we deal with these? How do we tackle this? Imagine if every area that David is in this area will say, I'm going to take one of these goals and this is what we're working on for the whole, not just my area, for the whole. Imagine, by 2030, I guarantee you will see a difference in where you live if we all worked on these goals and saw them as our theological goals, our mandate as Christians, not for our pastor to do it alone, for every one of us as members of, and call ourselves people of faith. The next one, please. Observe global effects of climate, the observed global effects. We see the sea level is rising, the Arctic sea ice is melting, the sea surface temperatures are warming. There's heavier rainflows, which is causing flooding in many regions. The crops are withering. Extreme drought is increasing. The ecosystems are changing. Hurricanes or cyclones, it's more and more in Africa. It becomes more frequent. Frequent heat waves, warmer temperature. You think I did this slide just yesterday, but I did it a while ago. Seawater is becoming more acidic. All these problems and challenges that we're seeing. And I say to people time and time again, whether you say I believe it or not, I'm not fighting or arguing the if you believe, if you're not. I'm saying what we experience in Africa. This is a fact, Next slide, please. Which I will not even begin to read, but global impact. It just talks about the impact of the rising temperature and what that looks like. You're going to have this here, so any church can look at that and work on that. But it is having an impact on all areas of our life and our health. And again, I'm talking about the continent of Africa, but I also see it in the United States as well. One of the things I'd make it my business, and if I had more time, I would have asked David could you have me go to different places, in the area, because I'd like to know what are the challenges. Quite often when we say, oh, someone's coming from Africa, we want to hear their challenge, but we have challenges ourselves. And we have to begin to say, what are these challenges and how do we stand in solidarity with each other in the midst of this? The next one, please. The environmental challenges that we see in Kenya, and you can see that the smog, you can see that the people with not knowing how to manage waste, you can see the forest areas, their trees are being cut down, you can see the floods, extreme floods in some of the areas. So deforestation, soil erosion, water shortage, I'm just picking some of them, the flooding, the poaching, domestic and industrial pollution. There's water pollution in that water that people are walking in. People bathe in that water. They use that water to cook with. It's a flood, yes, but it's everything going on from that water. Now you can imagine how, and you can kind of see that it's muddy, but yet that's the only source of water that they have. The pesticides and the fertilizers that are coming from a lot of the flower farms that nearby. So some flower farms are being sent to Denmark and other parts of the world, but yet that runoff that's going into the water system and polluting the water. Next slide, please. Again, some of them is causing climate refugees, and that is why we hear so many stories of refugees, people fleeing Africa and going from Morocco to Spain or Portugal and making their way to Italy. And it's because they're rented refugees in their own land. And that's a very sad story. Next. The cradle of humanity. The cradle of humanity, according to anthropologists, is in Turkana. Turkana is a northern part of Kenya. And I was sent there by my office because Turkana experiences, it's the biggest desert. I think I have some facts. Just go to the next one slide, please, as well. Maybe I didn't put it, but it's the biggest, yeah, this one, let's stay there for a second. It is the biggest desert in Africa. It's dry, it's biggest saltwater lake, so you cannot even use the water from Lake Turkana. And the people were really had no food. They were dying because of the heat, and so we try to do more sustainable development things, but we knew that we had to join hands and help with the food crises. And thanks be to God, Global Ministries responded, and a few other churches responded by assisting us and being able to assist the people in this area and to help them give food. They're just sitting down kind of waiting for that. I will kind of say something a little bit about that a little bit later. Let's go to the next one. Cyclone Freddie, that took place in Malawi a few months ago, and the devastation. I was in Malawi not too long ago before I came here, and we were in a meeting on loss and damages as it relates to climate change. And in this meeting, well, even before I went, I said to my office, I cannot go to a country like Malawi and talk about loss and damages that is talking basically intellectually looking at it and looking at it from a scientific point of view and what is it that you can do. Whereas on the other side of in the same country, you have the devastation of the cyclone. And I said, let us go and let's be in solidarity with the people there. You'll see the roof of the church, which I don't know if you can even detect it's the roof of the church, that of course the roof is up top, but now it's on the bottom. You can literally walk through the church. When I went to the other half that was barely holding on of the church, you could see it in another slide of the church barely with the part in the disco back. Yeah, in the middle, you'll see that. It's the walls had cracks in it, and I said to the pastor who worships on that part of that church, I said, this can come down any minute. But the cyclone effect, besides the buildings, and you see the bridge that has fallen down, that's washed away, the cyclone effect also went even beyond that. I remember at the conference I was in on I told you about on loss and damages, talking about people how do we compensate people who've lost so much? A chief of an area was there, and he said, I am a chief because of I have a community. It's kind of like a mayor. A mayor is a mayor, not because you're just a mayor of a town that has no people. You are a mayor of a town because there are people there. He said, but my people were killed. They're all gone because of the mudslides. I have no one else there. Again, that becomes a problem. Now, the people who survive in other areas of the mudslide, they now have to find a place to stay. So houses and rent has gone up for that. And schools had to close down because of their housing people in school. So now you have the education being interrupted. You have people who lost everything. You have the psychological effects of it. You'll have, you can see the buildings that are not safe and people who have to now build these buildings back that was there, that they don't have the money to do it, all because we could really change our lifestyle and change the way we live, and it would make a difference in the effects. And the thing that keeps coming to mind when I was there was that the climatologists, those who work in the area of climate change, keep saying Cyclone Freddie, not necessarily that name, will continue to affect Malawi, Madagascar, Mozambique, in the areas in Southern Africa, in other parts of Africa, other climatic changes, and it will continue and it will get worse. So what I saw the effects of cyclone, you'd think it can't get any worse, but yet it will get worse. And that's the scary part. It will get worse. So therefore I said to the pastor, but this church will probably come down again. It'll probably happen again. Yes, but this is what we have to do. So we're talking about every other year having to rebuild structures like this. That's just a question I raise. Let's go to the next slide, please. In my work, when we talk about climate change, food security, I work with going to the community and working. This is in a particular area in Kenya. I went to the government officials and began to talk about how do we work in the area of climate change. What is the area most needed trees planted? And we went to the school and got the young children involved in planting trees as well. Schools are usually boarding schools. Young people live on campus when they're in school. But the other picture is a picture of one of the church leaders with me, but we were going to speak to the county official about saying, How do we now have a green area? Because it's a very dry area. What do we need to do to work with the community, the churches and other faith communities? I should say when we work, we don't just discriminate. You know, it's like me coming into your neighborhood that people are devastated and says, I'm only going to get the Christians food. No, you work with everybody. So we're constantly working with the Muslim community across Africa. So we work interfaith. You know, depending on a big city, we will also work with the Hindu community as well. The next slide, please. This slide just shows the locusts. We had a locust invasion in Kenya. And again, that devastated our crops. I think that was a maize field. And, that's another issue that is affected by climate. The next one. I talked a little bit about this, social accountability, the voice of the churches, as well as the education schools and the minister, the churches, the people of God being prophetic, to be able to change and transform society. I am one who clearly believes that, we say the minister, in the public space. I believe that I can't, as a minister, take on the responsibility unless I have the people, and I think that we have to work, and we are working to begin to make sure that it is the whole church involved in raising their voice. It is everyone raising their voice on issues that affect of the people on a day-to-day basis. The next one, please. When I think about what is happening in Africa, I also like to lift up the resourcefulness of the people. It's time out that we say, whoa, look at them, the extended bellies with the flies in their eyes, without mentioning the resourcefulness. I think I can clearly say my 35 years working and living throughout the continent, I have learned more. I have received more than maybe I've even possibly given. But, my office gave the seeds to some of the farmers, and you can see them growing the crops and making sure that they have food in the community. And again, we've encouraged churches, because our churches are usually on a larger compound, a larger space, to grow, have a garden and help people to grow in that garden, so that members can come if they need food, community can come if they need food. But this has transformed the way people have lived. The next one. Indigenous seed banks are very important. And this is one of the women who have seeds, and in Africa, they've always have indigenous seeds and they pass it on. And we're encouraging that, because I'm not using genetically modified seeds, but indigenous seeds, and using that and passing it on to others. So that's just an example of a woman who has been showing her seeds that she has. Vihiga is an area in in the western part of Kenya. Next one, please. We have a program that we worked in. It's called Tree for Life, and you can see the benefits of planting trees. Our trees are not only trees for shelter, but also trees that for food, avocado trees and fruit trees, so that people will have trees to live. And we invite people to join us in planting trees, or giving them money, but also, the reason why so many trees, besides the fact that we have people coming to cut trees, because for whatever reason, I remember Firestone in Liberia, tapping the trees and over tapping them for the rubber, and or cutting trees because they make beautiful wooden things that we like made in Western countries. But also the biodigester, which is next to it, so that people will have an alternative besides the tree limbs that they use to burn, to cook with. We cook with a stove in our kitchen, but there's some places and some that people don't have that, and therefore they'll use the trees for a source of fire and cook outside with the fire. But a biodigester is where you collect the cow dung and use that, and it lights up the house, the area that you're working in, but also at the same time, you'll have the fire to cook with as well as an alternative. Again, the resourceful, I put this woman up there is because this woman was having, the one that's standing next to the cow, a different difficulty in making ends meet. Her children were not able to go to school. Schools in Kenya, you have to pay school fees. She couldn't afford school fees. Children were dropping out of school. They were going hungry. It became difficult. She received some seeds, and if you can see the greenery around her, And she planted these seeds, and these seeds began to grow, and to the point where the crops that she was growing, she had enough to be able to share, go out and sell them, but also have enough for her family to buy a cow so that she will have the milk and she will have the dung for the cow for the fertilizer. And her children now are able to go to school, but also go on to university. Praise be to God. So you're transforming the lives of people, and I think it's important. And it goes beyond just giving food, saying, okay, here's some food, because for how long we want people to have dignity, and dignity is being able to have and do it themselves. And these women are just in the field again with their crops of food. The next one, please. The resourcefulness of the church. This is the area in Kenya where the young girls are married off very early in age. But the church decided that, the girls needed to not only finish school, but go on to university. These girls would have not only gone through, I don't know if you know FGM, female genital mutilation, which in some cultures are very rampant. Some of them would have been married off at a very early age. But the church took them in a boarding school and preparing them to go to university. So again, the resourcefulness. And by the way, this is, little becomes much, where these church doesn't have much, but yet they're able to take whatever little they have and just share it, and to be able to know that this is their commitment to be able to do what they feel God is calling them to do. So they're quite resourceful. Next one. Again, the planting of, I talked about the fruit trees, where this young man is eating, I think, a mango he has, and the woman with the baby in the back, it's everyone involved, with the baby in the back as well, and she's planting at the same time. The next one. The next picture is just the women who are so happy with their crop, and they're just showing it off, the crop that they grew. The next one, please. What does God require of us? I often ask the question. To partner around the world, to strive for a world in which all people and creation share in God's abundant life. We take communion, the disciples once every Sunday. He would be probably every month, and I believe that transforming power to say, this is the body, that was broken for you. I think it's just such a powerful imagery. I mean, I've got to hold myself back when I take Holy Communion to remember, the cup that we drink from, and what that means to be a part of the shared body, of Christ. And this body of Christ that's a part of the shared body it's not only in our neighborhood. And I know sometimes it's easy for us to even look abroad and not even look in our own backyard, but I think it's a both and. It's not an either or. It's to begin to look at the people in our communities and that are not even in our own space, that even outside of our community. It's looking at people all over the world to know who are they, and the man standing on the tree is a Messiah. Messiah is one of the ethnic groups in Kenya. And I like that because I love the passage saying, watch women sitting on the wall. What is it that you see? And as he overlooks, I believe that you and I are called to say, what is it that we see? And what we see goes beyond just saying, oh, I see that, there's a field out there. But what we see is a question that causes us to begin to put our analytical hat on and say that people are starving, the way we're going in this world, we're divided, and therefore what we see, and then what are we going to do about it, and that's, again, that calls for all of us to roll up our sleeves and say, we've got to do something. And imagine just a little that we do is something. Professor Wangari Maathai, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, she's from Kenya, and I worked closely with her. And one of the things she tells a story of a hummingbird. And the story goes like this, is that there was a hummingbird that goes in there was a fire in a forest. And the animals in the forest wanted to know from the hummingbird, what do you think you can do? You're so small, and the hummingbird would go and get a little drop of water and drop on the fire. And then the bear was laughing and the deer was laughing at him and saying, but there's nothing you can do, this will never end. And the hummingbird said, what little I can do, I do what little I can do, one drop at a time. And I believe that you and I are called to be hummingbirds. I believe that what little we can do, one drop at a time. I know the forest is big out there. The forest is a metaphor for all the areas and the issues that we have to deal with, all the injustices in the world we have to deal with, all the divisions in the world we have to deal with it. But imagine one drop at a time. And that little hummingbird knew that there was something that he or she could do just one drop at a time. And I think that's what we're called to do, to be able to understand that there is a problem, watching the wall, standing on the wall, looking, and begin to say, okay, what is it that we can do? Again, it's all of us rolling up our sleeves and being able to do it. We are a church that responds very well if there's a crisis. But how well do we respond when the crisis means that you and I have to change the way we live? That's just a question. Next slide, please. This woman that I've taken a picture of, it's in triplicate, same picture, but just different scenes. She's from Takana, the area I told you I went to in December. It was December 17th to be exact, not that the date makes a difference. You can see the dryness in the area. But what struck me, besides the beauty of her, but what struck me about this young woman was each person got a bag of food enough for 3 months. And it was a very heavy bag. As a matter of fact, when I was handing it over, not to her, to someone else, I had struggled picking it up. That's how heavy it was. Typical of the way a person in Africa carries something is they carry it on the top of the head. The weight is more evenly distributed. And from miles around, you would see no house. So we know that they're walking long distances with their item. So what this woman did was she was the only one who looked to her right and took the basket, picked up the basket for her neighbor, the woman who's on the right, and put it on the head of the neighbor on her right. She looked to her left and saw the basket and picked the basket up, or the bag of food, and put it on the head of the person. And I said, this is a brilliant theological example of what you and I are called to do. The first thing we tend to do is I care for myself. I care for my own. I care for my own community. I can't look outwards, David. What you want me to look in the world when I have so many problems here? But this woman could have said, I've got my food, 3 months, I'm hungry, I'm out of here, But she served her neighbor on the right, she helped her neighbor on the left, then she helped herself. Brilliant. I said, she for me is my role model. When I look at my role models in the world, I can name so many named people, Desmond Tutu, Wangari Maathai, and so many other people I can name. But this woman ranks along with all of them because of her very act of saying, I'm going to help others before I even help myself. And I think this is the call of God. The next one, please. Sayabona. Sayabona is a South Zulu word, actually. And I love this word because I talked this morning when I preached, is about greetings. And in Africa, I've become a lover of words. And I think that especially of different languages, because while someone may translate it and say that's a greeting, I'm saying hello to you, if you want to know what that word meant. But when you go a little bit further in understanding what the word means, it goes beyond just saying hello. Us saying hi, it's just kind of, sometimes I feel, I've heard people greet me in the United States and they don't even look up. They just kind of wave their hand hi and say my words, but not look in my eyes. And before I get to Sayabona, in Swahili, the Swahili speaking people, when they say they say hello to you, it goes beyond saying hello. They first start off, I remember going into a place, and it happens to me time and time again in Tanzania. I was in Zanzibar and I went into the university to speak to them about something. And the person who greeted me first started by saying to me, how are you doing? Habari, it was your morning, habari asubuhi, and from my morning, he wanted to know, how is my health? From my health, he wanted to know, how is, my family? From wanting to know how is my family, he went on to know how is, the weather, how is Kenya? And then he began to talk about the weather, and then he wanted to know about the, thanks be to God, the rains are coming, because how are your cows? So how is your cattle? How is the goats? How's the chickens? And then from that point on, he went on to talk about welcome. And when he welcomed me, it was more than just saying, welcome to Tanzania. It was, welcome to the university, welcome to the particular area that we're in, welcome to Tanzania, Zanzibar, then Tanzania, And, I love that because he wanted to know about me, he wanted to know about where I was coming from, how my health, how my family health was. Sayabona, the Zulu word right there. When someone says that to you, that is a powerful thing because what they're saying is that I see you. So when I say Sayabona to you, Bonnie, I'm saying I see you, and I acknowledge your presence. I acknowledge who you are. So Zion, when I say Sayabona, when someone says this to me, it is an acknowledgement of your personhood. And if I acknowledge your personhood, it's impossible for me to ignore you, and the issues you're going through. Everyone is a person, and I acknowledge your personhood. When I say Sayabona to someone in the street, it goes beyond just saying hi. It's to want to know who you are. And I just love that. And I believe that this is what it means. When I first came here, I was at a climate change conference in Duke University. And one of the theologians from the Duke Theological School of Divinity was saying that the American society is the only society, and please don't, for those of you online, don't start throwing apples at me or whatever to try to hit me from saying this. But she said, I'm quoting from her, and I agree with her though, that we're the only society that does not practice biblical culture like everyone else, and I think she's right. There is no home that I can go to, a place that I can go into Africa, and not, invite you not only home, but also extended hospitality, whether it be a church community or someplace else. One of my colleagues said his mother lived on a mountain. When people would come down on the foot of a mountain, Mount Kenya, when people would come down to go to work, which was a long hike down, the mother would always have a cup of tea. So that would be a resting place, not charging. She was not making money from it. She just knew that there were people coming to work and going to work. She would make tea so that people can have tea to drink. And I thought that was amazing. Let's go back to the next one, please. I'm winding up. We grow back, not as we was before, but instead that we grow, towards what we can become. I thought about that during COVID because we constantly talk about going back, going back. I hope we don't go back. I hope we grow towards something different, And what that difference is I love, who was it? Who said they're from Florida?
Janice.
Janice is from Florida. Yeah, Janice is from Florida, but she's still keeping up, And I think that that's an amazing thing, with the people here, but also I pray that we grow back to even expanding who we are, expanding our churches and rethinking what we look like and how do we want to be and having these hard conversations. And I know we constantly have to go through this, having conversations, but I think it's okay, if we say it over and over and over again. If anyone out there is married, we know that, in relationships, you're constantly, whether it be with your spouse or whether it be with your children, having these conversations of what it means to be family. And I think that we as people of God are having these conversations or need to have. What does it mean to be kin in a relationship? Next one. I preached this morning on the word SAF, the acronym, which is speaking, acting, faith. And I think that as we pray, I think we're empowered to become speaking and acting. And that's what our faith is all about, to act on it, not to just say, keep it in the prayer lane and say we've prayed for these situations, but how do we act and make a difference? I said it earlier and I say it again. I had to come here, I had to change my dates. And the reason being is because I now that we know each other, anything we can do online is fine, but just to be here, it's very important to me, to see your space and to know the context of where I'm talking from, but also, I think, hopefully you see a bit of what you do. So it's not me. I mean, I've been working for 35 years, but I've been working on your behalf for 35 years. When you have prayed for the people all over the world, that prayer has touched me. When I was in situations, whether it be Liberia, Sierra Leone, or other hardship areas, when countries are going through coup, and I found myself in these particular African countries, it was the prayers of the people of God that got me through. You know, so I am grateful for your prayers. I am grateful for when you gave for mission, you know, gave to the church and gave to the denomination. That was the money that helped me to sustain me to do the things that I do on your behalf. So therefore, in one sense, I just become doing your work on your behalf based in Kenya. And I'm grateful for you allowing me to do that. And I'm grateful for you giving me the opportunity to share what we do, you know, you and I do. So I say thank you so very much. I said thank you in the various languages to say Asante Sana. We can get out of this. Asante Sana, you know, is the words of the Swahili speaking people. One of the languages in Kenya, actually, it's from the ethnic group that President Obama's father comes from. They're the Luo people. And they would say Ero Kamano, which means thank you. My mother's a Southerner, and when she would say thank you, she'd say thank ya. So thank ya, I say to you. And I say in my words of that deviation from my mother, thank you so very much for allowing me to serve on your behalf. Thank you so very much for allowing me to share what you do in Africa. And I look forward to having constant conversations. I don't know if we have even opportunity for questions, or did I talk?
Oh, no, we have opportunity for questions. First of all, round of applause and thank you for all that you have done representing the United Church of Christ and global ministries and our Savior Jesus Christ throughout the world. I mean, my goodness. So let's take some questions. I'm sure that folks have questions for Phyllis. Anybody would like to start? Anybody with questions?
How many years did you say you were in Africa?
35.
You get just
Oh,
Yeah.
and you grew up in New York City.
New York City girl.
Hmm. Now, I had part of my nurse's training in New York City, Columbia Presbyterian,
Oh, wow, yes, great.
a long time ago.
Yeah. When I do certain things, you know, like when I'm in Kenya and I order a pizza, I'm gluten-free. So when I get the opportunity to get gluten-free pizza and order it, I put pineapples there. And my daughter said she's going to take away my New York City card for me because a New Yorker would never put a pineapple on a pizza. So sometimes I get threatened to have my New York City card taken away from me. And she tells me I should tell people I'm from California because I have a pizza with pineapple on it. But yes, I was born and raised in New York City.
We can get pizza here with pineapple on it.
Yeah,
Domino's.
yeah, but she said it's not a real New York thing. So I'm just talking about the threat that I get from. But yeah, I am born and raised.
What part of New York City?
I'm from Queens.
Queens.
Yes,
You were from Queens.
yes.
I had quite an experience going to Queens when I was a student. It was supposed to be a relative of mine there, and classmate and I, we went on the subway system and we really traveled, but we found it was over near the Navy Yard. But it's
Yes.
quite-
Yes, it is a distance.
Phyllis, I have some questions too. So what was it like working with Bishop Tutu?
I think one of the things I often say to people is that I think I learned a lot about leadership working with him. He was an amazing man, and what you saw is the true him. And I remember when we would be in a country like Ghana, because of the refugee crisis, because of the fighting that was taking place in Liberia. And we would have long days of going to, let's say, the refugee camps, and we would just come back exhausted. And I would get a phone call. They would pass it on to me, and they said, well, we want to meet with Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And I would say, oh, no, you can't, it's impossible. He's very tired. And then I would go to him very proud of what I said. And he says, no, he said, those are South African refugees living in Ghana, and they just want to hear a voice from home. And he took the time, my point is that he takes the time with people. And there was no, sometimes we categorize people. Oh, if that was, the who's who of society, we would want to talk to them. But Desmond Tutu did not. I mean, he had been known when we go to a restaurant, he would jump up, and we called him the Arch. And we'd say, where's he going? He was going into the kitchen, finding the kitchen, to tell the cooks thank you because the food was so good. So he was a very appreciative person, but also a person who was amazing because he knew facts about people. He would come to the staff and, he would always have a pastoral time with us, go from person to person, but remembered the issues that we said that we needed prayer about. So not only he was a person who was on the global stage, but he also was a person who was very local and concerned about the individual. And I just loved working with him. Yeah.
Awesome. We did receive a message in chat from Pastor Heinlein thanking you for all you do. What a message for us. It is indeed an amazing message for us. I would imagine that Kenya is a place of at once extraordinary natural beauty and incredible beauty and wonder. Also, the history of colonialism, I'm sure, has left a huge negative impact on the land and on government institutions even to today. What are some things that you think that American Christians in particular, should know about Kenya? As one of those things like for the time that you were there, that you may have felt like, boy, I wish that people back in the US really knew this about Kenya.
I think, let me answer this question about maybe a little bit further out than Kenya and say Africa as a whole. I was telling the church this morning, I think I was talking one-on-one, and I was talking about, growing up as a young lady, we say, oh, we want to have a big diamond, we want this, that, and the other. And there was ever no question about where does the diamonds come from and understanding the mines that the diamonds come from and how children are being exploited, The first thing we do when an iPhone comes out is, some people will stand on a long line to get these iPhones without understanding that most of the things that it takes to run the iPhone, every natural resource. We would not have an iPhone if we did not have the Democratic Republic of the Congo that is torn apart by war, and children are used in horrific ways for mining. I would wish, I could tell them that the oil companies, the petrol companies of America, that they are, how in Angola, especially at one point, and how many of them were there and destabilizing, basically, according to many people, the country, so that they can now siphon many of the oil from the country. I wish, we would understand, because again, we cannot be uninformed as people of God, because many of the ways we vote, the issues that we push should be issues that we don't just think locally, we have to think globally, and how they affect other parts of the world. I think, even as it comes to climate change and some of the positions that our government is taking, for the longest, the Paris Accord that came up in one of the COP meetings. These are the global meetings on climate. America didn't sign, it recently signed, but how true are we to these initiatives? Are some of the issues that we need to raise and to know. And there's so much knowledge out here. I think we're surrounded by universities, even if we had a person who is from the area of economics, and what does it mean for us? What does it mean for the person who is suffering the more, but what does it mean for other people around the world? I think one of the areas that we've had in Kenya and other parts is that the importation of food, but food that is not worthy for anyone to eating, meaning it's either expired, or definitely not good for people, and again, that's the whole thing that becomes a problem as well. There was a bishop one time who was at a funeral, and he was talking about, he came from the area where many of the Kenyan runners come from, and he was saying that people are speculating or saying that many people in the area have died, and they've died because it's cursed, and he said it's not cursed, it's because we used imported fertilizers, and our cows ate the grass that we fertilized to keep away the weeds. And from that, they became, we drank the milk and we also ate the meat, which now caused a lot of cancer in our body, So again, to be able to, the regulations are strong, we need to, as people of God, raise these voices about how people are, what's being imported, and I'm not asking Americans to be the police of the world, but I am just saying, because I can also say everything that I'm talking about in the United States. Yesterday morning, before I came over, I was speaking to someone who's working in the area of climate justice, and she was talking about the cancer alleys in America. and meaning an area because of the fertilizers or other reasons, it's prone to cancer, and it's usually brown and Black people. And I can also talk about the cancer alleys that are in parts of Africa. So I think when we fight, when we talk, when we vote, when we speak about issues, I think we need to be able to speak with one voice and begin to lobby of some of the atrocities that are happening in the world, and to know them, because we know them, then we can respond differently. We can speak out differently, and we know how to be in solidarity with each other. And with that word of solidarity, I remember when 9/11 took place. And when 9/11 took place, one of the ethnic groups, the man standing on top of the tree limb is a Maasai. And Maasais believe that every cow in the world God gave them, meaning any cows in Pennsylvania, it's the Maasais. The farmers don't own them. It belongs, according to them, their cultural understanding. And they walked for miles and miles. They walked a distance, I would say, from perhaps, I don't know, Maryland to all the way here with their cows, because they walked to the US Embassy with their cows. And all you saw in the street were these cows. And they was giving it to the people of America because of 9/11.
Oh, wow.
Now, how amazing is that? We're not talking about people who have a whole lot. We're not talking about the Bill Gates of Kenya giving away. No, we're talking about people who struggle on a day-to-day basis and use that cattle, to feed their their families. But yet they gave it because they reached out, because we suffered a great loss. And I think that's an appropriate thing to say, because on tomorrow, where we have 9/11, that we had the anniversary of 9/11.
Yes.
How many languages did you have to learn?
Well, operating in Africa, it would be major ones, would be French, English, Portuguese. I can hear more the French and the Portuguese. The Portuguese was helpful because of my Spanish, so that was helpful. In Kenya, Swahili, I didn't learn a lot of, I knew words from the local languages. Yeah. My children have mastered not only the French, English, my daughter's Spanish as well, because they're Spanish-speaking countries, but also many of the local languages. Swahili is very close to Arabic and Hindi, one of the languages spoken in India, and therefore she can understand when people speak Arabic very well. I can understand some, but not as much as the others can. Yeah.
It was so good to see you at General Synod. Can you, is there anything else you'd like to add about maybe the difference between the church in the US and the church there? You mentioned about the hospitality piece, which I think is really significant. Is there anything else that you can?
I think the churches in Africa are I don't know if I mentioned this, I serve at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. It's about 3,500 members, Our young people, we have going on in a Sunday, I keep forgetting, it's anywhere between, I think about 7 services, different services, and different categories of young people, ages of young people have their own service, and we have a French-speaking congregation. We have 2 of the main services that are duplicate in the type of services, but the different, the youth have theirs. We have a deaf congregation as well. So it's a lot of services going on Sunday. So, and I have to keep reminding them, I actually wasn't assigned to St. Andrews. I was assigned to working with the Organization of African Instituted Churches. So when all the ministers are off on Monday, I've got to go to work, but we have long days, weddings constantly on Saturdays as well. So I think that it is the amount of people that are there. I think also, I love the family aspect of it, us getting together as family, all the time. And even the churches, the church is broken down into districts, and we have districts. Where I think that's one of the differences, the size of the church, the amount of people who go to church on Sunday. I think I would say Kenya is very conservative, I think about Kenya, but I going throughout Africa, I think there are pockets of conservatism. When I say conservatism, I want to put that in a different context than what we think about conservatism here. When I say conservative, it's kind of like the way people would dress would be different, coming to serve at church, the suit and the tie is constantly, wearing dresses are usually the way the woman would dress. So that nature of being conservative, when I say that. Churches have always been in Africa, I think, very much in the space of speaking out against governments and the harshness realities. And I think that that's good because they speak up on behalf of the people. So I think that the church, it brings together that space of socially what is going on with theologically, and speaking, whether it be truth to power, as Desmond Tutu talks about, or just, informing people of what's going on in the political scene. And again, I'm not saying, again, don't put your mindset to here, okay, I get in the pulpit and say, vote this way, vote that way. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about more of, when people are facing atrocities, when people are dealing with things that are injustice, you'll have many of the churches speaking out against those injustices, and working together as a coalition to begin to address them.
Excellent, thank you so very much. We did get a message in chat about Bobby Heinlein had to go, but it was still blown away by the size of the Sahara. Did not know that.
Yeah.
It is enormous desert. Any other questions that anyone has for Reverend Byrd? Anybody at Zion's?
One of the things that, by the way, I forgot to talk about, say about Turkana. While Turkana is in the northern part of the country, and it's kind of like isolated from the rest of Kenya, and the joke, or not, it's not necessarily a joke, but the truth, the reality is they keep calling themselves another country, although it's a part of Kenya, and they say that it's the illiteracy rate is 80%. So if you're talking about the development of an area, I keep on saying to people time and time again, we've got to develop the people, and I was talking to some of the students that did come to university, and I met them, that was in Nairobi University, but I met them when I went to Turkana, and they were saying how, there's a lot of cattle wrestling in the border, two border areas wrestling with each other, fighting each other. But they said that, once they came to university, they saw that people were not the devils or the demons that they were made out to be. They were their friends, and they became their friends. And, imagine if the people were, go to school, interact, understand that. But I also extrapolate what that means here. I think in the United States, I'm going to go back to the question, you want to know the difference. We live in echo chambers. People who talk like us, sound like us, say the same thing, live the same way, go to the same country clubs, go to the same schools, and they all look like us. And as a result, we don't have time for this, understand that people are people, people have needs. And how do we now begin to say, how do we really become the body of Christ? And I think that that's a challenge to us. I mean, it's more than just saying, I've taken my bread, I've taken the wine, I recite the creed, it's acting out what it means to be a part of the body of Christ, and I think that that's a harder task to do. And I think that that's one of the things that we're constantly called to do, and constantly reevaluating ourselves and saying, how are we the body of Christ? I appreciate you Global Ministries, and I was able to raise my children in an area where, my goodness, my daughter had us laughing when she was younger, and I keep teasing her about this today. She hated to go to bed because her siblings were up. By the way, I'm a mother of 6 children, and her siblings were all up and not in bed yet. And so she didn't want to go to bed. So her way of not going to bed was, she told me one day, I have to pray. And I was so proud of myself as a minister. I said, Phyllis, you've done an amazing job. I patted myself on the back and said, this is good, and she ran in her room and came back. And when she came back, she was tied up, her head was tied up, and, everything was, like, what are you doing? And she had her hands out. Well, first of all, her wanting to pray was prolonging herself going to bed. But then she said that she was a Muslim Presbyterian. I don't know how she managed this, but that's what she said. And because of her friends Muslim, and they prayed, and that's how they prayed. So that's how she was going to pray. And after she prayed that prayer, remember, she's prolonging bedtime. She now had to pray the Christian way, so that was her prolonging. But the point is that her and her Muslim friends were so close friends. Her friends who were Indians, they were very close, you know. And, you know, the holiday time of selling, whether it be Eid, after the fast day, or, you know, the Muslim celebrations, she got an opportunity to experience the world, you know, and understand the people and the issues. And I think that is an amazing transformative experience. When we leave ourselves isolated, you know, we don't have the growth, I believe, that we should have in, you know, in the growth in all the ways that one grows without experiencing the world, you know. And so I say that has been an experience that I treasure for all of my family. And I think that we miss out because of the way America is segregated in many different ways. You know, when you say segregation, it may not be institutionalized, you know, it may not be a government policy, but yet it's just the way we live. It's the way our churches are, you know, and if we don't do anything about it, we don't grow as much as we could grow from each other. Yeah. By the way, I'm used to talking very long, so you got to kind of put a stopper in me, you know. My daughter, who just went off to university, I don't know what I'm going to do now that she's not there, because she was always my timekeeper, and she was kind of like, "Okay, Mom, you know, remember you promised to take me out after this, so therefore you got to cut it off."
I have a question.
Yes.
20-some years ago, I was able to visit in Angola.
Oh.
And I saw the disparity between South Africa, where we started, to Angola in the midst of civil war.
Yes.
Has some of that disparity been improved?
Amazing question. I would say no. I think that it is still a disparity. You know, you know, the disparity is because you'll have a rich, you know, after apartheid or after, you know, the colonial era, you know, you'll have leaders that came in, some of them, you know, corrupt, others, some very good, but you still have a large disparity because it is a hard, think about the United States and the disparity between those who have and those who do not have. And therefore, you still have this large gap. You know, the question is, how do we, you know, deal with this gap? We're talking about gap not only in education exposure, but we're talking about, I grew up during the time of busing. And during the time of busing, the whole mentality was to take people of color and put them in the white neighborhoods because the school is better. But I say, why not improve the schools where the schools are? You know, why make me get up so early and go so far, you know, to school? And so I think that you have a disparity. It may not be an issue of busing. You may have people still in that community, but the education, the education is so totally different. You know, the schools would be richer in a richer neighborhood opposed to a poorer neighborhood. You know, the opportunities are just not there. But that is also that big gap that you would also have in Africa and Angola, even in South Africa. And even within South Africa, you have these amazing looking communities, beautiful places. But if you go a little bit further out, you'll see the disparity that people are living in, you know, and that is something that we have to really begin to address. Yeah, all over the world.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Any other questions? Reverend Byrd? Anyone from Zionists? Anyone at all?
We just thank her for everything she's shared.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you. Okay, please remember your gifts to Global Ministries to help to support Reverend Byrd and not just her and her efforts there, but efforts across the globe that our church is doing in order to reach out with the love of Christ in the world and to be mission co-workers with churches and with people throughout the globe. So remember to support Global Ministries. I just want to make sure I put that little plug in there. And again, Reverend Byrd, we want to thank you so very much for taking the time and making the effort to be with us here in person. For those of you out in Zoom land, thank you for taking time out of your Sunday afternoon to be a part of this. Maybe we should probably close with a prayer. Would it be all right if I offer? Would you like to offer? Or would you like me to offer? Let us close with a prayer. Oh God, we thank you and praise you for this time that we have shared together this day. We pray that you would continue to bless and be with Reverend Byrd and with her ministry. And we pray that the work of Global Ministries, the work that is done in your name and for your sake and across the globe, may be a work that is blessed in your sight. Lead us and guide us as we go forth into the rest of this day. In the name of Christ our Savior, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Phyllis. Thank you so much, everyone. God bless you. Grace and peace. Go in peace. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye. There should be a way.